Interpreting the Constitution, Idealism versus Realism, 1790 to 1820. In 1776, Thomas Jefferson wrote some of the most famous words in U.S. history. The Declaration of Independence expressed, encapsulated social contract theory, the idea that humans, not gods, create governments. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Reading this document, rights jump out to the reader. Rights are individual choices. Individuals are free to make choices about their life. Free to choose their occupation, free to choose their religion, free to choose their future. Individual rights. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But there's another important concept here, that governments are instituted amongst men to protect those rights. Governments provide order. If individuals get out of order, they threaten the rights of other individuals. Governments are instituted among men to protect those rights. So when one person exercises their rights, and their exercise of rights violates another person's freedom, the government steps in to protect the rights of the community. Governments then are empowered to limit individual liberty, so that if a person commits a crime, for example, they could lose their life, they can lose their liberty, they can lose their opportunity to pursue happiness. Individuals can be punished by society through the government. Citizens then empower a government to limit individual decisions, to limit individual power, and to expand the rights of the many, so that one person's exercise of rights doesn't threaten the society as a whole. When an individual uses their liberty to threaten the rest of the community, the government is empowered to step in and stop the individual. This seems like two contradictory ideas. That on the one hand, individuals have freedom, they have liberty. But the government has the power to protect it, which means you have to limit choices. So individuals can use their individual liberty. They can exercise their right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, as long as it doesn't threaten the life, liberty, and happiness of others. Once that does, the society, the people as a whole, step in to make a choice. So this social contract then, that emphasizes individual liberty, as well as empowering a government, produce disputes over interpretation and the implementation of that social contract. The framers sat down, reached a compromise. They could write the United States Constitution. The question is, what did that social contract mean? What did it mean to have individual liberty? There's an ideal here. Right? Idealism is the belief that humans should pursue a perfect solution. So what is perfect liberty? How does an individual express or enjoy perfect liberty? Can that ever exist? On the other hand, there's realism, the belief that humans should pursue practical solutions. What's the most practical path to liberty, to freedom? This dispute over an ideal constitution, a realist constitution, produced adaptation. Americans had to adapt to the changing environment they had. So the ideal then would be a limited government. The perfect solution was to be there's no government at all. But the problem with that is humans are not angels. If humans were angels, there would be no need for a government because everyone would recognize that their liberty should never infringe on others. But humans don't behave that way. Humans hurt each other. And when they hurt each other, they need to be limited by the government. Which means the government has to be empowered to stop us from hurting each other. So while in an ideal world, government power would be limited. In a real world, in the world that actually exists with humans hurting each other, there needs to be a situational strength. In any given situation, the government needs to have the strength to stop us from hurting each other. This produces a conflict between the ideal of a limited government and the real, which is that the situation demands that the government act. This creates a tension between idealist and realist. Over the course of the early 19th century, it produced a slowly, steady, increasing federal authority. That the federal government's power grew in the first half of the 19th century as the United States faced situations. The ideal was to have a limited central government. But in reality, the central government's power grew even though the laws of the Constitution did not change. This lecture provides 3 examples of the conflict between an ideal, limited power, and the real, situational power. And in each situation, the federal government's power expanded gradually to deal with the real situation, and it had to put aside the ideal that the government should have limited power. Those three examples are frontier security, the question over nullification, and then finally the expansion of slavery. In each case, there's a conflict between ideal solutions that Americans couldn't agree upon, and then the compromises they had to come up dealing with the reality of the situation in early 19th century America. Overall, though, there was a general pattern of expanding federal authority. That over the course of the early 19th century, the ideal of a limited federal government was set aside so that the federal government had the power to deal with the situation that actually existed in the early 19th century.